unknown number, no name, no warning. The voice on the other end was tight, rushed, like someone running out of air. I found your daughter in the woods. She's alive. But barely. My hands tightened on the steering wheel so hard my knuckles went white. What woods? I asked. Behind the old quarry. She had your number in her wallet. You need to come now. The call ended before I could ask anything else. I turned the car around in the middle of the road, gravel spraying under my tires, my heart pounding so loud it drowned out the engine. My name is Evelyn Brooks. I'm 56 years old, a widow, a retired nurse, a mother. And in that moment, none of those titles mattered. All I knew was that my daughter Madeline was somewhere in the dark, cold woods, alone, hurt, and fighting to breathe. As I drove faster than I should have, one thought kept repeating in my head. This wasn't an accident. Mothers know the difference between bad luck and danger. And whatever happened to my daughter out there, someone wanted her quiet. By the time I reached the dirt road leading to the quarry, night had already begun to fall. I didn't know it yet, but that drive was the last moment of my old life. Everything after that would be about survival, truth, and a kind of revenge that doesn't leave bruises, but lasts forever. I have lived in this county my entire life. The same roads, the same faces, the kind of place where people recognize your car before they recognize you. After my husband passed away, I stayed. Not because it was easy, but because it was familiar. I worked as a nurse at the regional hospital for almost 30 years, night shifts, emergencies, broken bodies and quiet goodbyes. I retired 5 years ago and thought my hardest days were behind me. These days my life is small and steady. I grow vegetables in the backyard. I bake on Sundays. I drive an old sedan that rattles when it hits potholes but never fails me. People here describe me as calm, reliable, the woman you call when something goes wrong. What they don't say out loud is that I don't quite belong. I've learned to recognize that look, the half pause, the polite distance. It's not hatred, it's caution. My grandfather used to tell me, you don't survive by being loud, you survive by remembering. He was a veteran, a man who believed that trouble doesn't announce itself, it watches first. I remembered his words as the quarry came closer. I remembered them because my daughter had married into a family that believed money erased consequences. And families like that never lose control gently. As the road narrowed and the trees closed in, I understood something with terrifying clarity. This wasn't about an argument. This was about power. And my daughter had crossed a line she wasn't supposed to see. The road to the quarry was barely a road at all. Mud, deep ruts, trees pressing in from both sides like they were trying to swallow the path whole. I had driven this way dozens of times years ago, back when the quarry was still active. Now it was just an abandoned scar in the land, forgotten and avoided. My headlights cut through the thinning fog as my thoughts spiraled. Madeline. My only child. She was 32, smart, sharp, the kind of woman who noticed details other people missed. She had left this town at 24 after marrying into money. Real money. The kind that changes how people talk to you, how doors open, how problems disappear. At least that's what it looks like from the outside. After her wedding, the phone calls became shorter, the visits less frequent. I would ask how she was doing and she would smile and say, "Everything's fine, Mom." And I wanted to believe her. Because believing was easier than admitting I might be watching my daughter disappear inside someone else's world. The further I drove, the clearer one thing became. This wasn't random violence. Nobody accidentally ends up beaten and left near an abandoned quarry miles from town. Someone chose that place. Someone chose the darkness, the isolation, the cold. When I saw the pickup truck pulled off near the tree line, my stomach dropped. A man stood beside it, pacing, his hands shoved deep into his jacket pockets. I slammed the brakes and jumped out before the car fully stopped. "Where is she?" I demanded. He pointed toward the woods without speaking. I didn't wait for anything else. Branches snapped against my arms as I ran, wet leaves slid under my boots. I fell once, scraped my palms, and kept going. Then I saw her. A shape on the ground, too still, too small. For a moment, my mind refused to accept it. Then she opened one swollen eye. and whispered my name. I dropped to my knees beside her and stopped myself from touching anything that looked broken. Years of nursing taught me that instinct can do more harm than good. Madeline's hair was tangled with dirt and blood, her face was swollen, one eye nearly shut, her breathing was shallow and uneven. But she was alive. That was all that mattered. "Mom," she whispered, her voice barely there. "I'm here," I said. "I'm right here." She tried to move and cried out in pain. I saw her arm twisted at an angle no arm should ever bend. "Who did this, Madeline?" I asked quietly. Her lips trembled. She swallowed hard like every word cost her something. "My mother-in-law." For a second, my mind refused to process it. I leaned closer so I wouldn't misshear. "Margaret Hale," she whispered. The name hit harder than the cold. Margaret Hale was a respected woman, charity boards, fundraisers, magazine covers, the kind of person people called generous and admirable without really knowing her. "Why?" I asked. Madeline's good eye filled with tears. She said I didn't belong, said my blood was wrong, dirty. Something inside me snapped. Not loudly, not dramatically. It was quieter than that. A cold understanding settling into place. Madeline grabbed my sleeve, panic flaring through the pain. "Mom, please, no hospital." I shook my head instinctively. "You need help. An ambulance is coming." She tightened her grip. "They have people everywhere, doctors, lawyers, administrators." Her breathing hitched. "If I go there, she'll finish it." I looked at my daughter lying broken in the dirt and understood something terrifying. This wasn't rage. This wasn't jealousy. This was someone protecting a secret at any cost. And my daughter had become a liability. In the distance, I heard sirens approaching. I had seconds to decide. Nurse or mother? Law or survival? And once again, my grandfather's voice echoed in my head. When the system is against you, you protect your own first. The sirens were getting closer. Red and blue lights flickered faintly through the trees like distant warnings. Everything in my training told me to wait, to stabilize her, to let the professionals take over. But everything in my body told me something else. Madeline's grip tightened around my wrist. "Mom, you don't understand," she whispered. "She will lie. They will believe her." I looked at my daughter's face, not just the bruises, the fear. This wasn't the fear of pain. It was the fear of being erased. I stood and ran back toward the road. The man who had found her was still there, pacing beside his truck. "Did you see who brought her here?" I asked. He shook his head. "No, I just heard her breathing. Thought she was already gone." The siren wailed louder. "Listen to me," I said, lowering my voice. "This is a family situation. I am a nurse. I'm taking my daughter home." He hesitated. "She needs a hospital." "I know," I said, "but if she goes there, she won't come back out alive." He studied my face for a long second. Then he nodded once. "I'll tell them I made a mistake." I didn't thank him. There wasn't time. By the time I got back to Madeline, the ambulance lights were flashing through the trees. We moved slowly, carefully. Every step was agony for her. I helped her into the car and buckled her in like I used to when she was a child. As I pulled away, I didn't turn on the headlights until the quarry disappeared behind us. My hands were steady on the wheel. My heart was not. Because the moment I chose not to go to the hospital, I crossed a line. From that point on, there would be no protection except the one I created myself. And I was prepared to do whatever that required. We drove in silence for several minutes. Madeline leaned back in the seat, eyes closed, her breathing shallow but steady. I kept my focus on the road, forcing myself to think clearly. When she finally spoke again, her voice was weak but controlled. "Mom," she said, "I didn't tell you everything." I glanced at her but didn't interrupt. "I found documents in Gavin's safe, financial records, transfers that didn't make sense." Gavin was her husband, Margaret Hale's son. I asked her to explain. The charity foundation Margaret ran moved millions every year, public donations, corporate gifts, all for children in hospitals, clean on paper. But the numbers didn't add up. Large sums were routed through consulting companies with no real employees, no offices, just names. Shell companies, I said automatically. Madeline nodded. I cross-checked registrations. Some owners were dead. Some didn't even know their names were being used. She paused to catch her breath. I asked Margaret about it, gave her a chance to explain. My chest tightened. And she didn't deny it. Madeline shook her head slowly. She said it was complex, that I wouldn't understand. Then she suggested a drive, said it would be easier to talk away from the house. The image formed instantly in my mind. A quiet road, no witnesses. She drove me to the quarry, said they were buying land nearby. Madeline's fingers curled into the blanket. When we got out of the car, she hit me, hard, something metal. She kept saying I was trying to destroy her family, that my blood didn't belong anywhere near their name. I felt my jaw lock. She left you there? Yes. She thought I'd freeze or bleed out before anyone came. I tightened my grip on the steering wheel. And then Madeline said the words that changed everything. Mom, I took pictures. My heart jumped. Of the documents, the accounts, everything, they're on my phone. I exhaled slowly, carefully. That was when I knew. This wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about leverage. And Margaret Hale had just made the worst mistake of her life. She underestimated a woman who learned long ago how to keep records. And a family that never forgot how to finish what it started. I didn't go straight home. Instead, I took the long way, back roads, turns I knew by muscle memory. If someone was watching, I wasn't going to make it easy. Madeline shifted in her seat and winced. Mom, she said quietly, I think they put something on your car. The words landed heavier than anything else that night. When Gavin insisted on having my car serviced at their place last spring, I hadn't questioned it. Family helps family, that's what I thought. I pulled over beneath the line of bare trees and crawled under the frame with my flashlight. It didn't take long. A small black box, clean, new, wired tight. A tracker. I ripped it off and set it on the ground like it was something poisonous. That's when I made the call. Daniel answered on the second ring. I need you, I said. No explanations, no build-up. He didn't ask questions. Where are you, he asked. On my way home. Madeline is with me, she's hurt. There was a pause. Then his voice hardened. I'm coming now, don't call anyone, turn your phone off after this. Daniel was my older brother, former military, security work after that. He was the one Grandpa trusted with maps and planning. If there was a way through this, Daniel would see it. I took the battery out of my phone and helped Madeline inside. That night, my quiet house stopped being a refuge. It became a command post. And by the time my brother arrived, the fear had already turned into something sharper. Resolve. Because once family shows up, running stops being an option. From that moment on, we weren't hiding. We were preparing. Daniel arrived just before dawn. He didn't rush, didn't panic. He took one look at Madeline and nodded like he had already accepted what needed to be done. We moved quietly. I treated her injuries the way I had done 100 times for strangers. Cleaned wounds, set a temporary splint, counted breaths, checked pupils. When I confirmed she was pregnant, the room went very still. Daniel sat down slowly. Then this ends now, he said. We didn't stay long. My house was too obvious, too exposed. Anyone with money and patience would start there. Daniel reminded me of something I had almost forgotten. Our grandfather's old hunting cabin. No road, no address, just a trail through the trees and a lake no one visited anymore. By sunrise we were gone. The cabin was cold and dark when we arrived, dusty, smelling of pine and iron. But it was safe. Daniel checked the perimeter. I settled Madeline onto the bunk and covered her with blankets. For the first time since the quarry, she slept. While she rested, Daniel worked. Burner phones, offline laptop, contacts who owed him favors. He didn't promise miracles. He promised information. And that was enough. Because people like Margaret Hale don't fear accusations. They fear proof. By nightfall, we knew two things for certain. The money trail was real. And someone had already been watching my house, which meant the clock was ticking. We were no longer just protecting Madeline. We were racing against people who believed silence could be bought. But they had made one mistake. They assumed we would beg. They assumed we would panic. Instead, we were doing what our grandfather taught us. Slow down, gather facts, choose the ground. And when you strike, make sure there is no room left to deny the truth. The cabin sat deep in the woods beside a frozen lake. No signal, no neighbors, no traffic. Just trees, silence, and time to think. Daniel moved like this place belonged to him. He checked windows, cleared the stove, marked sight lines outside. Everything deliberate, everything calm. I focused on Madeline. She woke in short intervals, pain, fear, then sleep again. When she was strong enough to talk, she told us the rest. Margaret was not angry when confronted, she was offended. As if Madeline had violated an unspoken rule by noticing numbers that were not meant to be questioned. You do not ask where the money goes. You do not ask who benefits. You do not ask why. Madeline did all three. Daniel laid the documents out on the table. Transfers, dates, patterns. It was not messy, it was organized. Which meant this was not desperation. This was routine. Daniel looked up at me. This woman is not impulsive, he said. She plans, which means she will not stop. I felt that truth settle in my chest. Madeline shifted on the bunk and placed a hand over her stomach. She knows about the baby, she said quietly. That changed everything. Because this was no longer just about protecting my daughter. It was about protecting someone who had not even taken their first breath. Daniel closed the laptop. We do not go to the police, he said, not yet. People like this bury reports, delay cases, lose files. Instead, we go to one place she cannot control. I looked at him. Her husband. Daniel nodded. Not for justice, not for mercy. For leverage. Because power only listens to power. And we were about to borrow some. Daniel's contacts worked quietly. No headlines, no emails that could be traced back to us. Just favors called in and databases opened where questions were usually not asked. By the second night in the cabin, the picture was clear. Margaret Hale wasn't just skimming from the foundation. She was siphoning money through 3 shell companies registered under false names, then moving it offshore. But that alone wasn't enough. People like her survive audits. They survive rumors. They survive investigations that drag on for years. Daniel leaned back in his chair and said something I won't forget. Money embarrasses people. Betrayal destroys them. That was when he showed us the second file. Margaret had been living a double life for years. A quiet affair with a much younger executive from her husband's company. Private flights, hotel records, a shared foreign account. None of it public. All of it documented. Madeline stared at the screen in disbelief. She preached morality, she said. Family values, reputation. Daniel nodded. And that reputation is her armor. Take it away and she has nothing. I understood then what this was really about. We were not trying to ruin her. We were trying to make her predictable. People act differently when their carefully built image is about to collapse. Daniel closed the files and looked at us. Her husband doesn't know any of this. Not the money, not the affair. If he finds out, he won't protect her. He will protect what he built. Madeline swallowed hard. And if he doesn't believe us? Daniel met her gaze steadily. Then we don't threaten, we don't beg. We show him proof. Clean, precise, undeniable. That was the moment the fear finally loosened its grip on me. Not because the danger was gone, but because I understood something powerful. We were no longer running. We were choosing where this would end. And that choice made all the difference. We chose a place where no one could make problems disappear quietly. A public diner in the middle of the city, bright lights, too many witnesses, Too many phones. Daniel went first. I followed a minute later and slid into the booth beside him. Richard Hale was already there. Tall. Controlled. Expensive suit. The kind of man who looked like he owned every room he entered, even when he sat still. He didn't waste time. "You sent me documents," he said. "You claim my wife attacked your daughter." I placed the photos on the table. No commentary, no emotion. "This is my daughter," I said. "She is pregnant with your grandchild." For the first time, something flickered across his face. Daniel pressed play on the recorder. Madeline's voice filled the space between us, weak, shaking, clear. Richard listened without interrupting. When it ended, he sat back and folded his hands. "Motive," he said. Daniel slid the second folder across the table. "Financial records, shell companies, offshore accounts." "Your wife was stealing from her own foundation," he said calmly. "My niece found it. That's why she was silenced." Richard flipped through the pages slowly. Then I placed the final envelope in front of him. Photos, hotel records, bank statements. His jaw tightened. "How much do you want?" he asked. I leaned forward. "Nothing," I said. "We want safety, a divorce, and your wife gone from our lives permanently." Silence followed. Then Richard nodded once. "I will handle her," he said. "You will not hear from her again." Daniel extended his hand. "This ends here." Richard shook it. When he stood to leave, he paused. "You protected your family well," he said quietly. That was the moment I knew. This was over. Not because we won, but because he understood. And men like him do not forgive threats to their legacy. Things moved quickly after that meeting. Too quickly for anyone outside their circle to notice. Margaret Hale vanished from public life within days. Officially, she was taking time away for medical treatment overseas. Unofficially, she was erased. Her name disappeared from boards. Her photo was removed from the foundation website. Donations were quietly refunded. Audits began without press releases. No headlines, no trials, no spectacle. Just consequences. Madeline's divorce papers arrived by courier less than a week later. Clean, generous, final. No arguments, no negotiations. Richard Hale kept his word. There were no late-night calls, no threats, no attempts to reach us through lawyers or intermediaries. And most importantly, no one came looking for Madeline. For the first time since the quarry, she slept without waking up in fear. I watched my daughter sit by the cabin window, one hand resting protectively over her stomach, the other holding a mug of tea. The bruises were fading, but the change inside her was deeper than any wound. She wasn't hiding anymore. She wasn't apologizing for taking up space. And I realized something as simple and heavy as truth. Justice doesn't always come with sirens or courtrooms. Sometimes it arrives quietly. Signed, sealed, and irreversible. And sometimes the most powerful revenge is not destruction. It's survival. Spring arrived slowly that year. The snow melted into the lake, the trees softened from gray to green, and life somehow found a way forward. Madeline gave birth on a quiet morning in June. A girl. Strong lungs, steady heartbeat, dark, curious eyes that seemed far too aware for a newborn. I held my granddaughter for the first time and felt something inside me finally unclench. They named her Nora Brooks. Not after anyone powerful, not after anyone wealthy. Just a name that felt grounded, honest, ours. Madeline kept her last name. That choice alone told me how much she had changed. There were no grand announcements, no glossy photos, no carefully worded statements. Just a mother, a child, and a future built carefully from the ground up. We moved into a small house near the edge of town, close enough for doctors and schools, far enough for peace. Madeline worked from home. I helped with the baby. Life became quiet again. But this quiet was different. It was chosen. One afternoon, as I rocked Nora to sleep, Madeline watched us from the doorway. "You know," she said softly, "I used to think strength meant never needing help." I looked at her. And now I know strength is knowing when to ask for it. She smiled and rested her hand on the doorframe. And knowing when to walk away. That was the real victory. Not the divorce, not the money, not even the truth coming out. It was freedom. Margaret Hale never returned. Her world moved on without her name attached to it. And we moved forward without fear attached to ours. Because in the end, no one can take what you protect with clarity, patience, and love. Especially when you refuse to disappear. People often ask me how I found the strength to do what I did. They expect some dramatic answer, rage, courage, revenge. But the truth is simpler. I was a mother who refused to let her child be erased. That's it. I didn't outsmart anyone because I was cleverer. I didn't win because I was braver. I survived because I stayed calm when panic was expected. I listened when others would have shouted. I prepared when others would have begged. That is what real power looks like in ordinary lives. Toxic families don't always scream. Sometimes they smile. They donate. They shake hands and take photos while quietly destroying anyone who threatens their control. If you're listening to this and something feels wrong in your life, trust that feeling. Pay attention to patterns, not promises. Watch actions, not apologies. And remember this above all. You do not owe silence to people who hurt you. You do not owe loyalty to people who see you as disposable. Protecting yourself is not revenge. Protecting your child is not cruelty. Walking away from abuse is not weakness. It is clarity. Madeline learned that. And now she is raising a daughter who will never be taught to shrink herself for anyone. As for me, I return to my garden, my quiet mornings, my ordinary days. But I am no longer the same woman who answered that phone call. I am someone who knows exactly how far I will go for the people I love. If this story resonated with you like the video, share it with someone who might need it, and tell us in the comments where you're listening from. This is the art of revenge.